by showing you a picture of my hometown, where I am right now. I'm not in the capital of Sweden, Stockholm. I am up north in a smaller city called Umeå. And this is a picture of the river and the northern lights. And Umeå is has a strong identity of research as well, because we have a big university here that has been here for many years. So, but Friends as an organization, we have offices in different cities of Sweden. So I would like to start by just saying hi from Umeå. I looked it up before this talk, that between my town and the capital of Kazakhstan, it is 4,200 kilometers. And if I were to drive by car, it would take me 58 hours. And so I'm very happy for the possibilities to speak to all of you, even though we have a long distance between us. So for the Friends organization, we are an NGO, a non-governmental organization operating in Sweden. And like I said, we've been doing this for 25 years and a little more even, because we were founded in 1997. And what we do is all about knowledge, basically. We think knowledge is such an important tool to create change. So we have 3 legs, so to speak. We develop knowledge, we apply knowledge, and we spread knowledge. So to develop knowledge about bullying and discrimination, both nationally and internationally, we do that by gathering and developing and disseminating research and best practice. But we also do that by initiating networks and meeting places where people can meet and discuss and move forward and move the needle on bullying prevention with both researchers and practitioners and other interested parties, so they can gather around that issue and how bullying can be stopped. We also develop methods that can be used by practitioners, for example, teachers, in their everyday life. And like I said, we also apply that knowledge. Friends education, training courses, and work materials are based on the Swedish Education Act, the Discrimination Act, and the school curriculum, and other documents that control children's living conditions. And I will come back to the legislation later on to explain a little bit more about what that looks like in Sweden. So the programs and training courses that we have, they aim to provide knowledge and structure and concrete tools to prevent bullying, but also degrading treatment and violations, and also discrimination and other forms of violence. And we do that to prevent it in the long term and to promote equal treatment and equal value for everyone. And the content on the training courses is based on extensive research, but also on the many years of experience that we have and that other people have. But one important part is also to spread the knowledge. There is so much knowledge about bullying today. If we compare it to just 15 years ago or 20 years ago, there is so much more research and so much more programs and so many initiatives to prevent bullying. So the good news is that we have never known so much about bullying as we do today. If we're looking back at the 80s, there was just a few research articles published about bullying. And then in the 90s, it increased, but now it is just peaking, going straight up. There are thousands of published articles about bullying, and also a lot of experience from people who are working with children and other people to prevent bullying. So to spread knowledge, we conduct advocacy work aimed at the general public, but also towards the decision makers, to strengthen children's rights to grow up without being exposed to bullying or violence or other violations. We need a strong policy to create a childhood free from violence. One of the initiatives in Sweden the past 3 years from our part as an organization is to make the policymakers, the decision makers, to include bullying when they are talking about preventing violence. Bullying is one form of violence between children and also towards children. And just a few weeks ago, there was an investigation presented to the Swedish government that was called A Childhood Free from Violence, where they had looked at how we as a society could prevent all forms of violence among children. And we were very happy to see that bullying was included in that document, and that the investigators also suggested some really strict and good actions to prevent bullying in Sweden, so that we see that violence is like a web of violence, and bullying is one part of that. And I will come back to that later as well in my talk today. So that is what we do as an organization. And Friends, like I said, were founded in 1997. We were founded by a girl named Sarah. She was very young when she started the organization, and she herself was subjected to bullying in school. And after graduating high school, she decided to create change for other children and young people. And that's why she started Friends, as a nonprofit organization working against bullying in Sweden. And her story is that when she was bullied in school, when she was about 13 or 14 years old, she was completely lonely and subjected to very severe forms of violence. So she created Friends with her own belief of change. And I will come back to her story as well. So what we mainly do when it comes to these 3 legs of knowledge is we have developed our organization and methods for the past 20 years, and we are today an organization that provides research-based tools for adults, mainly to prevent bullying among children. I was happy to hear the summary from the previous webinars that adults are always responsible when it comes to bullying, and the child can never be held accountable or be responsible for stopping the bullying. That will always be the responsibility of us as adults. And today, I'm not here with all the answers, of course. I mean, all of you, with all your experience, you have also answers and experience and knowledge. So I'm not here to provide knowledge or solutions that are just like from me to you. I am here with some conclusions, and I'm here with some lessons learned, because of course, when we have been working as an organization for so many years, we have also made mistakes, and we have also learned with time what can be effective and not. So today I would also like to share with you some of our mistakes, some of the things that we have learned, and sometimes the hard way, in the years that we have been engaged in bullying prevention. And I'm going to focus on 4 of those learnings with you today. So like I mentioned, Sarah, our founder, in the early 90s, Sarah went to high school and she felt alone in the world. In her diary from that time, 2 sentences were repeated time and time again. She wrote, "I wish I had someone to be with. I wish I had a single friend." She was severely bullied and totally alone. And everyone saw that in school. Everyone heard it. But no one in her class did anything to stop it. And neither did the school, the teachers. No one intervened. But suddenly one day when she was in 9th grade, the spiral of bullying broke. And it was not by a teacher or a counselor or another of her classmates who broke that spiral. No, it was actually one of the most popular guys in school who showed empathy and courage and looked her in the eye and said hello. And this was something unheard of for Sarah because no one said hello to her in school and she was never included in any conversations. But when this popular boy actually looked her in the eye and said hello, that gave an impact to others. And he started doing small things. He started like asking her what lunch they had today in the cafeteria, or he asked her about some homework assignment or something. They didn't become best friends, and it was not like she suddenly was included in the popular gang, but the action that he took, it was like an impact for other people, other students in the school. That hello gave a great echo, so to speak. And it didn't change overnight, but it was a difference that created changed. He had broken that great cruel silence that surrounded Sarah. And this made her believe that one voice can make a huge difference and one hello can be viral and vital. And that is also why I know it might be hard for you to see it, but we always wear a pin with the Swedish word hello, hey, on us to remind ourselves how important a hello can be for someone who never hears it, for someone who is excluded, and for actually be included. And that one person can make a huge difference, the whole difference. So a few years later, Sarah, she founded the Friends organization, and she did that based on that firm belief that one voice can make a difference, and also that students in school have a great power to create an environment free from bullying. Not that it is the students' responsibility, but they are creating the environment. And for many years, that was also our main method. Our training courses was focused on strengthening students. We trained 30,000 peer supporters during many years. But that is also one of our learnings. I mean, involving children and youth it's in our DNA. It's why we as an organization exist, is because a student took a stand. But we also learned from research and from our own experience that it is not always as simple as that, to just train students and giving them the power to feel that they can change a situation. And I think maybe you have heard this before, but there is a great, a big systematic review by researchers Tofty and Farrington from 2009, where they looked at different components of bullying prevention. And they saw that peer support systems, it was highlighted as an effective method, something that actually could change bullying in a school, for example. And after that, there have been other, of course, published articles and studies on that matter. But also in Sweden, a few years after that big systematic review, there was also an evaluation from the National Agency for Education. And there they saw that if students are actively participant, that could be an effective contribution. But they also saw that sometimes peer supporters, if they were not used properly in schools, that could actually increase bullying. So there were some like mixed messages from researchers and from agencies evaluating components. And that report also gave some critique to us as an organization, since we focused on peer support system as the main method for change. And the report pointed out several things that we had already identified that needed to be changed. Because what we saw was that it was so dependent on the school structure and the support of adults and the engagement from the principal, if this was working or not. Because in one school, the peer support system could be flourishing and working really well, and they were actively engaged and not with too much responsibility. But in another school, they were totally left alone, and the peer supporters were kind of part of a popularity contest almost, that you voted for the most popular student, not necessarily the student that was best suitable to being a peer supporter. So we did a lot of changes. We learned our lesson that how to involve students must be done in the right way. And we have made several changes since that in the way we work with student participation. So it's not as easy as identifying just a tool or a component in bullying prevention and then implementing it, because it works in different ways. But what we do know is that we need to analyze what we mean when we're talking about student participation. And that is still an ongoing discussion for us in how to engage students. Because as a child's rights organization, we of course take a child perspective. A child perspective means a will to speak for children and acting for the best of children. And the child perspective, you can say that it is based on adults' perspective on children and their thoughts and actions and needs, but it's still me as an adult taking that perspective. But in recent years, at least in Sweden, and I know in other countries as well, the term child's perspective has been lifted as a relatively new concept that has gained more space in recent years. And that is slightly different from a child perspective, because it represents children's own experiences, their perceptions, their understanding of their world of life. Here, the child is the subject, and the starting point is the children's own voices and thoughts, unlike the child perspective, where the children themselves do not necessarily have to be involved. And this is an example of that is when we, a school, call us and want our help with training courses and mapping and methods. We always start with a survey with all the children, a questionnaire. All the students in the school and all the staff as well fill out this questionnaire about unsafe places in school and about their perception of safety and well-being and equal treatment, and of course the prevalence of bullying in school. But when we have that result, we do not give it to the school principal, and we do not give it to the teachers first. The first thing we do as an organization is that we go and meet the students to present the result. before the adults even see it. So we gather a group of representatives from different classes, and then we show them parts of the survey result and discuss with them, like, how do you see this result? What are your analysis? Do you agree with this? And why do you think this is the situation that we are looking at? Because they are the experts of their everyday life. So after we have done that, after we have the analysis of the students, then we can take it to the principal, and then we can take it to the staff to look, okay, so this is the situation now. What should we do about it? This is what the student thinks we should do, and that is always very helpful, because when adults just look at numbers and see, okay, so 15% of the students feel unsafe when they enter the hallway in this particular area of the school, they have their own interpretation on why that is. But without asking the students, we don't really know what are the causes of that feeling in that particular area. So it's easy for adults just to put in measures that they think will solve the situation, but maybe they are sometimes pointing those measures to the wrong it's not the accurate way to do it, because there's something else that is actually the problem. So student influence is a tool that reduces the risk of bullying. We can say that student influence or student participation, it's closely linked to both the child perspective and the child's perspective, and we can summarize it like it is a tool to just getting that perspective is to use student influence. And there is also, of course, research of the connection between student participation and bullying. We have one study actually done at the university here in my city in Sweden that shows that a high degree of student influence in the school reduces the risk of bullying, that there was very clear connections between that. And of course, it is also important not only to talk about bullying and how we treat each other just in certain, like one day every year, there could be like a bullying prevention theme for everyone in the school, which is great, of course. Really encourage schools to do that, or other settings and schools as well. It's always good to bring up the subject of bullying, but to really have it as a lived experience, you also need to have it continuously, maybe even in the classrooms, to integrate it into ordinary teaching situations. And this is something that we do as well as an organization. We provide materials for teachers and other school staff to work with bullying prevention in the classroom. And there all could also be problems, because there are many schools that use different forms of classroom activities with like laudable intent to include students in the bullying prevention work. And some classroom activities are included in anti-bullying programs, and some are just conducted within the school's own work. However, there is research that indicate that some classrooms activities focused on bullying prevention often are perceived by students as tedious and boring and constructed, and sometimes actually could increase bullying. While there are other research that highlight like age-appropriate materials as a key to providing knowledge and engaging students in the school's anti-bullying work, if the content is relevant to the student's situation. So we have also, that is also one of our learnings, one of our mistakes, that we provided materials maybe without the influence or the participations of students in making or creating that material. So in the recent years, we have shifted towards a more a digital tool, and that has many benefits to use digital tools in the classroom. It is easier to coordinate. It creates new opportunities for dialogue and discussion. It's easy to document it, and also that the students think it's more fun. There are some level of gamification in that process that they, while learning about bullying and while discussing bullying prevention and while discussing how can we make a stand, they can also do it in a fun way that make it feel more relevant for them. So not only including students, not only asking them, but also making it in a way that they feel is relevant and fun is one of our learnings from our 25 years. Okay. And this may sound the next lesson, to have a shared vision based on children's rights. It may sound not very inspiring to have a vision, not very concrete to start with a vision. But I would just like to explain our view from that and what we have learned. Our vision is a world where no child is subjected to bullying. And if we look back, I mean, today is a much better world for children than it was 20 years ago or 50 years ago or 100 years ago. It is getting better. And we are, as a community in the world, getting there because we have, at certain points, sat down and together decided goals and visions and what kind of society we want or what kind of world we want. And for example, in Sweden in 1979, corporal punishment was banned in Sweden. And at the time, there were some discussions around that, of course. But today it is, of course, it still happens that adults use corporal punishment against children, but it is very, of course, illegal, but also frowned upon. It is not accepted. It's not normalized to use violence against children. And that could never happen if we didn't have a clear vision or a clear statement. So to create change, we also need that as a stepping stone. And the same with the Convention of the Rights of the Child in 1989 that Sweden ratified. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. We signed it very quickly, but only a couple of years ago in 2020, we also made that actually a part of the Swedish law, that the convention, the UN Convention of the Right of the Child, is also a law in Sweden now. It's a part of our legislation, and that actually means something. But I would like to share with you also a story of a Swedish author, Astrid Lindgren. She is one of the most widely read authors of children's book in the world. You might recognize her, of course, from Pippi Longstocking. Is the most widespread character that she has created. She's not with us anymore. She died in 2002, but she was a very important voice for the perspective of children through her books. And she also supported a movement of introducing the law against corporal punishment in Sweden. And in 1978, she held a famous speech in Germany that is called Never Violence. And in this speech, she told the story of a young mother who decided that her son had to have a good spanking, the first one of his life. And the mother told him to go out and find a suitable stick or rod for her to use. And the little boy was away for a long time, and he eventually came back in tears, and he announced, "I can't find a rod, but here is a stone that you can throw at me." At which point his mother also burst into tears, and she threw her arms around him, and they spent some time crying together. And then she placed the stone on a shelf in the kitchen, and it stayed there as a permanent reminder of the promise that she has made to herself at that moment. She promised never violence. And being exposed for violence in early childhood is one of the strongest predictors of any type of violence later in life, including bullying. So like I mentioned before, the web of violence, everything is connected. And we need to connect the dots in a shared vision of not subjecting children to violence. And bullying correlates with other types of violence as well. And many forms of violence are interlinked. So preventing bullying and promoting safety and equality and inclusion at school may at the same time help reduce several other problems. And like Astrid Lindgren said, that everything that ever existed first in one person's fantasy, which is why a shared vision based on children's rights are very important in the bullying prevention. And the good news is that violence against children is preventable, and that is also stated in Article 19 in the Convention of the Rights of the Child. And all countries have pledged to uphold also the Agenda 2030, the Social Development Goals, which includes a distinct target for the elimination of all forms of violence against children before the year 2030. So we need to get started with the work if we're to make that goal in time. And when it comes to connection between different types of violence, I will get back to that in a bit. But there were also research when it comes to that. A recent study describes how the rise of parenting behaviors that demean or belittle children, that is also associated with increases in bullying among their children. So how parents actually treat their children at home, not only when it comes to corporal punishment or physical violence, but also in the attitude. If we demean the children at home or we belittle them, that can also be associated with high rates of bullying among those children. So you are all part of the bullying prevention and the violence prevention as well. So to drive change by having a vision based on children's rights, remember that everything great that ever happened in this world happened first in someone's imagination. And I mentioned before that it is important to, like, when we use methods or when we implement strategies in schools or in other settings, it is important to think on like how to do it. But what we have learned is also that it is not enough with one strategy or one tool or one focus, but that also that bullying prevention need multi-level strategies. And I don't know if you have heard that old poem or that analogy about 6 blind men around an elephant. But the story goes that the men are in the dark, they are gathered around the elephant, but none of them actually know what an elephant is. So they are in the dark feeling different parts of the elephant, and one of them is touching the tail and says, "Oh, I know this must be a snake," and another person is touching the tail and says that, "Yeah, I know, I can feel that this is a rope," and another person is touching the leg and says that this must be a tree, a big tall tree, and so on. But none of them knows that it is an elephant that they are standing around, because they are limited in the sense that no one is seeing the whole picture. And that is, of course, the point of that story, that they need to speak to each other. They need to start communicating, and they need to do that in order to understand what they're actually trying to understand. And the same goes for bullying prevention, or the understanding of why bullying occurs. If you're only looking at it from one angle, then you don't get the full picture of a very complex phenomenon. And that is what this picture here is trying to visualize. And that comes to, of course, when it comes to research, because some researchers are only interested in the school culture and only look at the school culture, and some other maybe psychologists are very interested in the individual and the characteristics of the individual and what made a person behave in a certain way. And of course, other perspectives as structural power relations in society or relationships in the group. And all of these perspectives are relevant, and all of these perspectives are true. There's no like certain knowledge when it comes to human connectedness or human relationships. It always change because we as humans change and societies change. So we always need to revise what we know and why we know it. But also to talk to each other and look at multi-level strategies, because the causes are on multi-levels. So then also the measures need to be on multi-level, many different levels and many different perspectives. And maybe some of my colleagues from around the world that have been having webinars this week have talked to you about the social ecological model when it comes to analyzing bullying. And there is a fairly good consensus in the bullying prevention community that bullying needs to be discussed on different levels. A relatively large part of the research on bullying deals with risk and protective factors in the social ecological model. And this model is not, of course, it's not as simple as this, but it is very good as a framework for investigating how different factors impact bullying and degrading treatment and violence. So one important lesson is that it is easy to forget parts in this picture, and that the emphasis on one thing can be maybe too strong. In Swedish schools for many years, we saw that there were maybe too much focus on the individual perspective, on that level of the ecosystem, because of course it is persons who are involved in bullying, and it's very easy to focus on those children, those individuals, when analyzing why bullying occurs, and also what measures we can take to stop and prevent it. But sometimes it is very important in to lift your eyes, your vision, and look a little bit further, and to see what is surrounding this individual, what made them make these choices, what in the relational and organizational and societal structures have impacted them into making these choices or being in this situation. And it is also sometimes easier to change something around structure or relationships or the organization, which also makes the situation totally different for these individuals. And there are, like I said, many risk and protective factors in the research on bullying prevention. And risk factors is factors that makes the risk for bullying higher. It is not necessarily that a risk factor actually has a causal relationship to bullying, that if this happens, then automatically the bullying is automatically caused by that risk factor. But there are connections between it, and the same goes for protection factors. And like I said before, the good news is when we are preventing violence, we can easily prevent many different forms of violence, because there are many shared risk and protective factors. If we're looking at the individual level, the risk factor of witnessing violence, because if you witness violence, that is a risk factor for bullying, but it's also shared across 7 types of other violence, not only bullying, but also child abuse and neglect and sexual violence. And looking at poor parent-child relationships, that is a risk factor that is shared about across 7 types of violence as well: youth violence and suicide and bullying. And at a community level, to experience community violence, that is a risk factor shared across 4 types of violence, other youth violence and bullying as well. And looking at the societal level, poor cultural norms that support aggression towards other is a major risk factor for across 6 types of violence. It's a risk factor for sexual violence and teen dating violence and child abuse and some other. So it is looking at it this way, that there are so many risk factors on these different levels, it might feel not so positive, but I mean, it is actually positive news that if we prevent or deal with some of these risk factors, it can have a great impact, not only on bullying, not only on sexual violence, but also on other forms of violence, because so many of these risk factors are shared. So that is the good news. Preventing one type of violence in the web of violence can prevent more violence, including bullying. But I would like to take a moment to talk also about the risk factors specifically when it comes to school and when it comes to bullying, because there are many, like I said, extensive research on this. And some of the risk factors for bullying in school is a negative or conflictual school climate. Also, relationships. We heard in the beginning that you have listened the other day or yesterday about also relationship phenomenon of bullying. Another risk factor is the absence of anti-bullying norms. It is super important to establish in a school, in a setting where children spend their days, that bullying is not accepted, or it is very strong anti-bullying norms can be very important, because if that is absent, that is absolutely a risk factor for bullying. Inferior teacher support as well. The teachers are, of course, very important in this matter. I know that many of you are teachers, and if the teacher support is absent, then also there's a greater risk of bullying. And this, connected to that, is poor classroom management and the perceptions or feelings toward the school. So you can work with establishing relationships and as a good and strong classroom management, and promoting the feelings toward the school as an institution can also be bullying prevention activities. But of course, there are also protective factors in school. A positive school climate is a very strong protective factor, and to work on those relationships. I mean, like I said, I worked for 15 years with bullying prevention, and when I ask researchers, like, if you were just to say one thing, what is the most important thing when it comes to bullying prevention, almost everyone says relationships, teacher-student relationships. As a teacher, You need to get to know every student, try to learn something about them, show that you are interested in them, that you care about their learning, that you care about their situation. That is a very strong protective factor for bullying. But also good teacher support, and like I said before, the efficient classroom management, and a positive climate of coexistence, that we see this as our school and our environment and something that we do together, and not just a school that I go to, or that I'm not a part of a community. So teachers promoting mutual respect is very important for that, to also promote those the positive climate, but also the positive student-teacher relationships. But as a teacher, the research also shows that it is good to have high expectations on students' performance, that also expect them to learn and expect them to perform in school. That is also something that can be good when it comes to violence prevention. So that not only teacher support and high expectation, but also good personal treatment from teachers towards students. Students want respect from teachers as well as the other way around, which is good for bullying prevention. But in order to do all this, also good and clear and fair rules that are applied justly in the school will also help. But research also shows that if there are rules that are not clear and that are not the students doesn't understand why you have them, or they are just like decided by maybe a principal or a teacher or something without the involvement of students, then it's harder for them to follow the rules, which also creates an environment where more bullying can occur. So sense of belonging and satisfaction with school in general, and attachment to school and school connectedness are all important protective factors when it comes to bullying and school. Okay, so I've talked to you about 3 lessons learned. I'm going to go now into the 4th and last one. We have many more, of course, lessons learned. It is always a learning. I mean, every day is learning when it comes to bullying prevention. If there were one way to work that was efficient in the whole world, in every school or every sports club or on the internet or all the places where children spend time, if there was just one way to do it, we would already be doing it, and bullying would be eradicated. We are still learning, all of us, of course, and we are learning what works in different contexts. So our mission is to provide adults who work with children, that we can provide them with knowledge and tools and structure and courage to stop bullying and promote equality. And as you might already have understood, we use interdisciplinary approach, and we combine research and established practice. So to do that, we partner with Swedish and international universities and researchers and other organizations. I was happy to see that on the webinar that you are listening to this week, many of our international friends or collaborations were represented. And we do that to obtaining all this new knowledge and insights, so that we are able to develop and update our methods and training courses and tools. So I would like to tell you a little bit about a school-specific and research-based approach, what that could be. And this is the wheel of a systematic approach. We base our trainings with an intent to look at causes instead of symptoms. Like I mentioned before, when I talked about student participation, if we don't talk to the students, we are maybe more likely to aim our measures towards the causes instead of the symptoms. No, the other way around, sorry, that we are aiming them towards the symptoms instead of the causes. Maybe that unsafe hallway that I was speaking about before, maybe the symptoms are that they are pushing each other in that hallway, and we act towards that symptom to make the students, okay, so this is a rule here, you cannot push each other, and we will put more adults in the hallway so that they don't push each other. So we aim all the measures to the symptoms. But if we actually map and analyze the situation with help of the students and teachers and other persons, and actually look at the causes, maybe we could see that the causes are like unequal gender norms that are making the boys push the girls, but we didn't know that because we didn't actually look at the problem deep enough. So maybe what we need to do is actually work in the classrooms with gender equality or violence prevention in other areas to make the pushing in the hallway disappear. And that is what this wheel is trying to visualize, that mapping should be the first step. And mapping can be surveys, of course, but it could be other ways to map a situation. It could be interviews, or it could be observation, or it could be workshops, or art projects, or photographing to actually see what is the situation in our school. And not to skip the second part, because that is something that we learned in our work in Sweden, that many schools did a good mapping, they did a survey and they asked the students, but then they skipped the second step and they jumped directly to the implementation because they saw, okay, so this is a problem and now we take measures. They didn't analyze the result. And that is very important, not just to not put a band-aid just on the symptoms, but to actually aim the measures towards the causes. And when you have implemented it, of course, to follow up what we have done, what we're doing, did it have effect? Did it have the desirable outcome, what we thought? And if not, what should we change? And this is nothing that we as an organization invented. This is like classical wheel of prevention. This is what the World Health Organization use when they are talking about violence prevention as well. But it works in many levels as well. You can use it in a whole country when it comes to bullying prevention or violence prevention or quality, following up the quality of teaching. But you can also use it in one certain bullying situation when bullying has occurred. If you have a situation with a few students involved in bullying, in a bullying situation, you can use this wheel as well to map and analyze, and implement and follow up in that particular situation to be sure to work efficient and to actually take the problem seriously and solve it much faster than just skipping right to the third step, the implementation step. And this is also the approach that we have been using in our Friends program. There are a training program that we used for some years that had some good, there was some evaluations that showed a general decrease in bullying by 24% when working with the Friends program. But the next lesson learned, we saw that it did not reach that effect in every school. Schools have different problems and different conditions. Like I said before, when I talked about that peer support system, it didn't work the same way in every school. And the Friends program that we implemented had good general effect, but when we looked at the individual schools, we saw that in some schools the bullying dropped by 50%, and in some by 20%, and in some it didn't change at all, or in some schools it didn't even was a bigger problem after the intervention that we provided. So the current lesson, or what we are looking at now, is what works for whom and in what context. Schools have different problems and they have different conditions. And we need to think and look more about what works for whom and in what context does it work. And that is also there is research about this as well, where they have seen that different schools need different things, of course, and different intervention works. One intervention, one bullying prevention program in a school can work differently for the people doing the bullying, the people that are subjected to bullying, and the ones that are doing both. In research, they are called bully victims, that they are both engaged in bullying, but they're also being subjected to bullying. But the interventions can work differently for those subgroups. And it can also see that some intervention work differently for girls and work different for boys. Some intervention works good with bullying victimization, but not as good for perpetration. So there are so many factors to consider when we are working with bullying prevention, and one size fits all. I don't think that it actually exists when it comes to bullying prevention or stopping bullying. But having that said, there are still many very good bullying prevention programs that has been that are evidence-based, and that you can see that, like, if you work with this, it's gonna you're gonna have a decrease in bullying prevalence. And since bullying is such a big problem, has such severe consequences for those subjected, it is important to, if you can, and if it's suitable for a certain school, to implement a program is always, I mean, I think it's always a good idea. But just having that in mind, that it might not work the same for everyone, and might not have the same effect for the school in the next village as it has in yours. So we are looking in general now as the Friends organization to learn more about what works for whom in what context, but also to, in general, looking at eliminating risk factors and increasing protective factors, and doing that within this systematic approach. So a customized setup could also offer a mix of general knowledge with measures that works best for the specific schools, the needs in that context. And we are also right now learning a lot in Sweden when it comes to bullying levels in general, because in the past we were among the best in the world when it came to preventing bullying. We had very low levels of bullying, looking at international reports. When we compare the level of bullying in different countries, Sweden was very among the best in the world. But we are losing in that place. We are not the best anymore. We see that in the past decade, bullying in Sweden has gone up, and in the Nordic countries we used to be the best, and now we are in like the last place when it comes to the Nordic countries. So something is happening in Sweden. Something is happening with how we look at bullying. Something is happening when it comes to how teachers and school authorities deal with that problem. And we have, as an organization, of course, very a lot of analysis, many analysis about why that could be, and that is also part of our opinion forming and policy work, to raise that issue also on a national level, to break that pattern of the increasing of bullying in Sweden. So that is our ongoing lesson, or our current lesson, what we are trying to know more about right now and learn more about right now. and a very important factor when it comes to that is to measure and report bullying. I said I would tell you a little bit more about the legislation in Sweden, because we have a very strict legislation, but bullying is actually not mentioned in the legislation. And the reason that it is not mentioned is that I heard in the beginning that and the moderator said that there is a fairly a consensus, or when it comes to the definition of bullying, that it is repeated and it's power imbalance, and so on. But I would also, when they wrote the current Education Act in Sweden, they decided not to use the term bullying just because of that definition, just because of it is often defined as something that it is repeated. And the lawmakers in Sweden decided that we cannot wait until it is repeated to act. I mean, even if it just happens once, everyone who works in school must act to stop it. So even if it is a single violation, a single act of degrading treatment, everyone who works in a Swedish school is obligated to act. So that is why they do not mention bullying. So what they do mention is degrading treatment. And they define that as a behavior that violates a student's dignity. But that behavior is not linked to the grounds of discrimination, because discrimination is something else that is stated in the Discrimination Act. I will tell you about that as well. So degrading treatment is a behavior that violates a student's dignity. And it is from the perspective of the student. If the student says that they feel sad, or they have been subjected to something that make they feel less worthy, or that has violated their dignity, then that is the case. There is no adult person that can come in and say, like, no, you are wrong, that was not degrading treatment, because it's always subjective from the perspective of the child. And the obligations of everyone working in school is to always report and investigate and take measures. So if you're working in a Swedish school and you suspect, or someone tells you, or you see it yourself, that a student is subjected to degrading treatment, you need to report it to the principal at once. And the principal needs to report it to the municipality or the owner of the school if it is a or like a private school. But if it is a they need to report from to the responsible actor, so to speak. And that has to be done every time. So you don't wait until it is considered bullying in a general definition, that it is repeated, or when you looked at power imbalance, or if it is aggressive, or if there's an intention to hurt. It is the subjective experience from the child. And then the school is obligated to investigate the situation and take measures to make it stop or not happen again. So, like I said, very strict legislation. But there is, of course, it's not perfect, of course, because sometimes we also meet schools that act in these different single locations. But since bullying is not part of legislation, they sometimes maybe don't see the pattern. They don't see that it is a part of like single incident that are actually connected to a bullying situation, an ongoing bullying situation. Of course, many schools can do that, but there are there's sometimes confusion when it comes to the terms degrading treatment and bullying, and what they should do and when. But still, we see it as a very positive legislation that we don't accept even one incident of degrading treatment that we need to act right away. And the other legislation, the other act I wanted to tell you about is the Discrimination Act, where we have 7 grounds for discrimination, and that there is a total prohibition in school to discriminate anyone when it comes to the grounds for discrimination. And those are gender identity or expression, age, ethnicity, religion or other belief, and disability. And that is also it is also prohibited to harass someone connected to one of those grounds for discrimination. So there are there are 2 legislations, and the Discrimination Act is connected to the grounds for discrimination, and the Education Act, that chapter of the Education Act, is everything else. But the obligation of the school is the same. You need to always report, investigate, and take measures. But like this, this picture also says, ask us. That is also a very important lesson, that we need to measure what we pressure. If we see it as something is important, if we see it as an important issue to prevent bullying in school, we need to ask the students. So that is also one of the focuses that we have right now, is to implement and make the Swedish authorities have strict regulations to do a national survey about bullying in all Swedish schools, because right now it is not clear if schools have to do it. The authorities and the school agencies, they recommend it, and there are I would say that most schools have a survey, but maybe not the same one, and there are no national compilation or aggregated result when it comes to that. So that is something that we see as very important to implement in Sweden, and we have a project, ongoing project, together with the Örebro University, one of Sweden's leading university when it comes to researching bullying, and together also with a tech company called Tieto Evry, where we're amped up to combat bullying through creating they call it a digital twin. I'm not going to go into details on what a digital twin is, but it is connected to, if we have a national survey with lots of big data on bullying in schools and other settings as well, but also a lot of other data. I mean, there are data on grades, there are data on if students are in school or at home, attendance, and other data as well. If we can combine that, to use that as a problem solving, it can be collected and run against other statistics available about schools and class sizes. And this project, it's ongoing. It's like an invention project, but what we are aiming towards is to create that digital twin environment where that artificial intelligence will be able to predict future trends based on that collected data, which means that we could actually be looking into the future, to, instead of doing a survey and analyzing it maybe a few months later and then seeing, okay, so that took place a few months ago and now we're going to analyze it and put in the measures. What a digital twin could actually do is to suggest look into the future and see what will happen in this school now based on all these big data sets, to also suggest concrete actions to intervene before it is too late or before the bullying has actually happened. But that's just an intervention project going on right now. But the main message is ask the students what's going on, and then use that as a basis for interventions. So I'm gonna start wrapping up. I just want to summarize, and then after that also leave you with a few tips. And So many lessons learned for 25 years of bullying prevention, but involving children and youth and using them as a resource and experts are one of the most important lessons that we have seen. To base all work on bullying prevention on a shared vision based on children's rights, and that all violence is preventable. And by preventing certain acts of violence, we can prevent other forms of violence as well. All violence is connected. We need to connect the dots to see how we can work in the best way to prevent it. And in order to do so, to use multi-level prevention strategies and not only focus on individuals and not only focus on maybe the classroom level, but to actually work on multi-level strategies. And in those levels, to focusing on making the risk factors fewer and the protective factors more. And in doing that, also to take into consideration that schools are different settings where children spend their time and are different, and that different intervention can work differently for different persons and different schools, and to take that into account when implementing anti-bullying programs or other interventions. So to use a school-specific but research-based approach is an important lesson for us. Okay, like I said, just want to give you a few tips before opening up for questions. We are a Swedish organization, like I said, but we have some international activities as well. We have been working in Lithuania for many years with supporting them to implement our programs there. We're working with a children's rights organization there called Vaikų in Lithuania. It means child line. But we have also other collaborations with other actors in other countries. And a part of that is also to translate some of our online training courses into English. So if you go to our website, friends.se, but click on our English section, if you look around in there, you can find 3 of our training courses in English if you speak English, and one of them is called Organizing a Safe School, and it looks at what bullying is, the causes of bullying, and how to prevent it. There's another course based on like to take action when bullying happens. That course is based on that Swedish legislation I told you about, that you need to act even the first time, but it has recommendations that we think can be an inspiration, or maybe also something to work with in other countries as well, step by step. What should we do when bullying occurs? What do we recommend? And there's also a course for parents there to try to take a children's perspective as a parent in a bullying situation and work together with a school towards a solution of that. So check that out. And I would also like to take a moment just to mention the World Anti-Bullying Forum, because Friends believe that the best way to end bullying is by sharing knowledge and experience that we all have around the world, and also to bridge the research practice gap, because there are so much research, like I said, but it doesn't always reach us or you, the people that actually meet children. So we have a quest of bridging that research practice gap. And one way to do that is that we founded the World Anti-Bullying Forum in 2017. And the World Anti-Bullying Forum is a meeting place for researchers and practitioners and policymakers around the world to end violence against and between children in accordance with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We choose to do this to bridge the gap and create a meeting place. So it is biannual forum The first one was in Stockholm in 2017. Then the second one was in Dublin in 2019. And the third one was in Stockholm again in 2021. And now in 2023, it will be organized in North Carolina in the United States of America in October. And I don't know if you have any possibilities, but just want to inform you that you're all welcome to check that out. The conference, it's usually between 700 and 1,000 delegates, both researchers, policymakers, and practitioners in 3 days discussions and forums and panels and workshops around bullying prevention. So if you or anyone you know could be interested in that, tell them to check out the worldanti-bullyingforum.com. Okay, so with that, I just want to say thank you and give the word back to the moderator.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Warg. This has been very interesting information. And this was very interesting to look at it through the prism of an NGO. You've been speaking about the way how children, parents, educational institutions, and the government can cooperate. And we have a few questions. The questions are quite specific.
Okay.
The majority of our participants are practitioners, and the questions are quite precise. Could you share a few examples of the most efficient approaches to prevent bullying, being an international advisory organization? Well, your presentation provided a few examples, but maybe you could tell us a few examples of the most efficient approaches applied by government institutions.
Okay, yeah, it was a specific question, but also a big question, of course, to the efficient ways to prevent bullying. Like I said, there are extensive research on this, but I would say to put an emphasis on those protective factors. For example, working on teacher-student relationships. That is a very efficient way to prevent bullying. Because if a student has a good relationship to one adult in school or in the sports club or where in any setting generally, it will be easier for that student to tell about their experiences, because that's one of the biggest problems, is that students don't always tell adults about the bullying situation because it is a normalized situation. Many adults and kids see it as a normal way of growing up, that there is some conflicts and there is some bullying and maybe I should deal with this myself, and they don't have trust in the adults that they can help. So they don't tell anyone, and the bullying goes on. And it's the longer bullying keeps going on, then the harder it is to stop it. So a very efficient strategy is to create positive and strong relationships between adults and children. And another one is to focus on the school climate, to look at the sense of belonging, the sense of connectedness, to have positive feelings towards school, and to build up that a community sense between teachers and other staff and students, to have a strong connectedness is also something that is efficient. To have good channels for reporting bullying, not only say verbal communication, but to open up for other ways of communication, maybe to leave a note in a box, or then maybe you can send an email, or to have many channels for the children to tell adults about ongoing bullying, but also to not just ongoing, but also this, like the situation in general in school. That's 3 examples, but I mean, there are, of course, many more that we can talk about.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Frida, there is no magic stick or magic pill that all pupils and teachers could take and say, this is the strategy, we are going to follow it, and this will bring fruit. In your presentation, you've said that strategies work differently in different teams, different schools, of course. And this is the repetition of my question. So, based on your strategy, this strategy should be developed by the team, and then your organization is helping to develop this strategy, right?
I mean, you're right that it's different in different schools. They have different needs and different contexts, but I mean, there are some general knowledge that everyone can apply. That is not, there's no magic stick. I'm sorry, there's no like general way to work for everyone, and everyone will have the exact same effectiveness. Too bad. No quick fix when it comes to bullying prevention. It is hard work. It needs to go on all the time. You will never be done with it. I'm sorry to say that, but if you start now like extensive work and you implement a bullying prevention program, or if you decide to implement interventions yourself, you will not be done. You will not look back in 6 months or 1 year or 3 months and stuff like, yes, we check that box, we did the bullying prevention thing, and now there will be no more bullying. It needs to be ongoing all the time. And the general thing that most programs and most researchers are agreeing on is that the whole school need to be involved, the whole school approach that I think you have heard about before, which means that it cannot be one teacher or a group of teachers or the principal only to engage in bullying prevention. You need to engage the whole school, the parents, the teachers, the other staff, the kids. Of course, not everyone has to like talk about bullying prevention all day, but we need to have everyone on board. And for us, when we help a school, it is different what they need from us. Some of them want more of a set menu, and they have done the mapping and the analysis, and they say, like, we have a really big problem with racism in our school. There are tensions between different ethnic groups that we want to work with that. And then we have training programs for them, and we have some measures that they take how to raise the knowledge in that school. But some of them are not that specific. They just want to work with bullying prevention, and that's when we always recommend that wheel that we talked about with mapping, analysis, implementation, and follow-up. And then it depends on what the mapping shows us. If it shows in dialogue with the staff and dialogue with the students that we need to take measures when it comes to the school climate, then that is what we try to provide structure and knowledge around. But what we also say is, like, we as an organization do not stop bullying. That is you who are working with the kids who are doing that. We provide knowledge and structure and help and taking the research and making it more easable to use, but they are the one preventing and stopping the bullying, because they are the one meeting the kids every day.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a very important comment that you've made. And then based on your experience, still, do educational institutions use the ready-made evidence-based programs, or the majority of schools make tailor-made programs? What are the shares between them, and whether the first and the second approach are efficient?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I mean, that is exactly what we are struggling right now in Sweden. Like I said, the bullying is increasing. The bullying levels are increasing in Sweden, and I don't have exact numbers, but set programs, evidence-based programs, are not that popular in Swedish schools anymore. And I think that has to do with the evaluation that I talked about, that evaluations show that the efficiency vary, that programs are good, but not maybe for everyone. And that is very important with implementation. So I would say the most common bullying prevention strategy in Sweden is to cherry pick, to pick parts that you think is, you maybe take a classroom material from friends that you have looked at and you think it's good and it's suitable for my students. I work with that material there, but then we will maybe use some other knowledge when it comes to engaging the parents. And then maybe there are staff in the school that has a lot of knowledge, the counselors or other. Normally in Swedish schools there are like a safety team or bullying prevention team that works together with ongoing cases, but also with prevention, and they have a lot of knowledge, so they can also share that knowledge with the staff. So it's not that common to actually follow a strict program anymore.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. There's a comment and a question. It is not a secret that inspired and brisk teachers who love their job do not have bullying situations. How do they select teachers to be employed at schools in Sweden? Or the question is, do all teachers attend training on anti-bullying?
No, not all teachers. It's not a mandatory part of the pre-training for teachers. But myself, I was a teacher, and then when I did my training in the university to become a teacher, it was mandatory for those years. But it has changed. That there's like some elements, and it is. I would say most teachers had some training, but it is not a clear mandatory module of all the teacher training. And that is also one of the demands that we have on the government as an organization, as an NGO. We are not only providing knowledge, we're also making demands to the policymakers on how to make a situation better. And that is one of the demands that we have, that it needs to be more clear on what knowledge the teachers need, and also to keep getting that knowledge even after they have started their career as teachers. It is actually one of the most common reasons for leaving the teacher job is the social aspect of it. It is not the teaching math, or it's not the salary, it's not the other parts, the hard parts of being a teacher. It's not being able to deal with conflicts, and bullying is one of the most common reasons to leave your job as a teacher. So we think teachers need more help. They deserve more help and deserve more knowledge to focus on the things that we were actually there to make the kids learn. And if they're not safe, they will not be able to learn. And that was very frustrating for teachers as well.
Frida, there are bullying teachers.
Sorry.
Are there teachers who commit bullying? Are there teachers who commit bullying against pupils?
Oh yes, for sure. There are. That is definitely a problem as well. Teachers bullying students. It is when we look at surveys, it is not as common. It's more common that students bully other students, but in all schools there are some levels of bullying from teachers to students, and I mean that is very serious problem, because that is like a double betrayal, because as a teacher, as an adult, you are responsible of the care of these children. You are you have a more power, you have like a higher power balance for sure, but you're also responsible for caring for these children. So when teachers bully or subject kids to degrading treatment, it is a double betrayal compared to just being bullied by other students.
Thank you. There's one more question. Could you please share your vision on the following? What would you recommend to decision makers and practitioners in the developing markets of education in order for more comprehensive implementation of the best international practices? Like what are the prospects of more precise lessons that should be learned?
From policymakers to educational environments. Did I get that right? Okay. Well, I can name many things that would be important for policymakers to implement. One of the things we have already mentioned, the knowledge and training of teachers is one of them. Another thing is the focus on also on staff that has not teaching staff, to have a more higher presence of counselors and or I don't know the exact English word, but like staff that are among just are in recess and in the hallways that are like some present among the children to have more more staff like that. I would say to implement that whole school approach would be something that should be mandatory for all schools, to not just put one person as responsible, to implement a national survey system, to ask every kid, are you bullied? In what way? How do you feel? If to ask every student about that at least once a year. To involve online bullying in the prevention strategies in school, because even if it is happening outside the school, it will have effect for kids in school, because if they communicate online and then they meet each other in school the next day, it's going to be a school problem. And so to always also include online bullying and violence in the school bullying prevention. I could go on, but there are some examples.
Thank you. And we are already behind the schedule. And I dare to ask the last two questions. Question one. We all know that situation with bullying in the world is deteriorating, and therefore there's a large interest to it, and everybody tries to organize conferences, trainings, adopt laws, because this is an acute problem. Why do you think there is aggravated bullying in Sweden?
I think there are different things you can say about that, but one of the things is that I think we as the adult community has taken a step back. We do not we were kind of not think that we were done, but we were kind of happy with like, okay, so we have it under control. bullying is, of course, a problem, but it's not on the top of our agenda anymore. We have taken, as a community, a little bit a step back and not prioritizing the issue high enough. For example, it's just an example, but that the authorities no longer say that it's mandatory to measure bullying. That is something that says something. It says that we don't care enough. That we are not, that the principals are not successful in motivating all the teachers in the bullying prevention, and to promote those skills that kids need. I mean, there are like training skills, social, emotional learning. It's good for bullying prevention, but it's good for all other aspects of life as well. And we have taken a step back from that and focusing more on the actual, the teaching and the skills of math or reading and writing and that part of schools. And we have forgot to see that those two missions are intertwined, and you cannot separate the knowledge part from the safety part in school. They are connected. If you're not safe, you cannot learn, and if you don't learn, you're not safe. So I mean, that is just one mission, and we have taken a step back from that.
Clear, thank you. This is a very interesting viewpoint. And there are special thanks to you, Frida, for inviting us to the World Anti-Bullying Forum. This is a very interesting announcement, and our participants are interested whether it is necessary to register at this event.
Yes.
Whether there are any conditions to participate in it. Will this be broadcasted online, or will it be an offline event?
Yeah, I'll try to summarize that real quickly. It is different. Like I said, it's been organized a few times. And when we did it in Stockholm in the middle of the pandemic, we did a hybrid event where everybody could participate online. Now that it is organized in the United States by a university there, they are not organizing it as an online event, but the key sessions will be recorded and we will put it on our YouTube channel. So if you go to the worldantibullyingforum.com and go to resources, you can also click into our YouTube channel where there are many filmed workshops and presentations from the past 3 conferences, all for free. And just look there. But if you want to participate at the actual event in the US in October, you need to register, but anyone can come, but it's not free. You can see the admission fees on the website, but it is open now for registration. But the abstract session is closed. If you want to present something, it is too late, because then you need to send in abstracts beforehand. But there are still opportunities. I mean, if there are actors who want to have an exhibition table or stuff like that, are still possibilities for that. So just look at the website and email, and we'll try to help you with the questions.
Thank you very much, Frida. And thank you for today's presentation, for your time, meeting, and interesting experience that you've shared, and for your discussion. It is always interesting how government and NGOs cooperate, and it's great that you are doing it so fine in Sweden. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, all the best.